So what we're going to cover today, pretty much we're going to start with my favorite subject, me, tell you a little bit about myself, and tell you a little bit about how my background really led me to build this product that I'm going to show you today. It's called SPARTAN, and why I felt like there was a problem that needed to be addressed. Of course, we wanted to go through and give you some hot takes about why I think some things are broken. If you read, anyone in here already read the DBIR? Did anyone flip through it, look at it, consider it, toilet paper reading? All right, maybe not. So what occurred to me as I read through the DBIR is that we're still seeing the same things that we've been saying for 20 years. And I felt like there was a way for us to move past that, and I think it's a communication problem more than anything else. I'll do a demonstration of SPARTAN. If you do have your laptops and things like that and you want to play with it yourself, you have an opportunity to do that. I'll show you how to install and those types of things. It does require that you have access to Node and NPM, so if you don't have that, we'll catch up with me after and we'll get you set up. The other thing that we're going to do is actually figure out what we can do with SPARTAN, starting with digital skimmers. And then finally, I'll show you how you can get in contact with me at the end. So I'll be taking you on this journey today, so I figured you should get to know your captain. Anyone know who this is? Space Ghost, Coast to Coast? Yeah, that's one for the olds out there. So Space Ghost is, I watched Space Ghost all the time as a kid, and it always struck me as interesting that he was able to, it felt like they were able to actually have a real conversation. So a little bit about me. I spent 8 years in the United States Air Force, doing everything from working on help desk. There's nothing like the phone call you get at 3 a.m. from a general officer wanting to figure out why his BlackBerry won't play Angry Birds. At the same time, that was probably one of the most rewarding jobs that I had in the Air Force, because I got to help people and I got to connect with people and I got to solve their problems in real time. I joined the Air Force because it was the one service that I felt like was taking cybersecurity seriously. Before I joined, I thought that the internet was just web pages and I was going to get to do that in the Air Force. It turns out it's not. I was blessed with the opportunity to attend some of the inaugural network warfare training courses that the Air Force offered, and it kind of opened my eyes and really exposed me to the world of hacking and InfoSec, and I've been in love with it ever since. So one of the cool things that I did while I was in the Air Force, beyond getting to be there for the dawn of Cyber Command, beyond getting to build up hunting in the DoD while I was in the NSA, I also had the opportunity to work on non-traditional weapon systems, such as the Predator. So one of the things that I would say I'm pretty proud of is the fact that we were able to figure out a way to build a tool that basically neutralizes all malware running on the Predator weapon system. So while there are many mixed feelings about that program, I'm pretty proud of the fact that there will never be a news article about a bird falling out of the sky due to malware. So I'm pretty happy about that. I tell that story all the time. Once I got done having fun in the Air Force, I decided to have some fun someplace else. So I moved to Boston and became a product manager for a company called Pony Express. I see some head nods out there. Some of you know what Pony Express is. And I really love Pony Express because what they were doing was something different, and they were looking and thinking about IoT in a different way. One of the things that I very quickly had to learn in that role is that product management is 150% about listening. You listen to the market, you listen to your customers, you listen to developers, you listen to the board. You listen to everybody, and you're trying to rack and stack all those opinions and figure out which one is the most important at this hour of the day. One of the things that you do when you're a product manager is you take all those words and all that feedback that you're getting, and you reflect it back and see how much of it sticks in the market. And I happened to be doing exactly that when I did a talk at Target about 1.5 years ago. And the CISO came up to me at the end of it and said, "Hey, what's your long-term game plan?" And I said, "Well, I intend to have your job." And he said, "Well, come get it." So that's how I found myself now serving as a lead InfoSec analyst at Target in Minneapolis. So the interesting part about that role is that I work with developers. and product owners, people that are responsible for taking all those inputs and turning the known problems into solutions. My job is specifically looking at Target.com and our mobile platform, and doing that, figuring out ways that we can field those products in ways that are minimally risky to our guests. I think you guys might have heard about a little breach that took place a few years ago. I wasn't there. And even if I were, I can tell you that Target what led me to decide to take the role at Target was the fact that they get it now. They take it seriously, and there's not a person there from all the way up to the CEO that doesn't the security story doesn't resonate with them. So I will tell you that even down to the developers, they listen to us. But I do tend to hear the same kind of pushback over and over. The first one that I hear a lot is what I call the Narnia defense. Now, the Narnia defense is where someone says, oh, that thing that you're asking me to do, that's handled someplace else. That's upstream, it's downstream, some other made-up place. It's Narnia. It doesn't exist. No one can actually put their finger on it. It's just something you made up to get me to stop talking to you. Okay, I guess understand that, but I hear that sometimes. The other one I hear a lot is what I call the willful ignorance defense, right? Where does it say we have to do that, right? If it's not written down in front of me, if it's not a direct policy, it's not on the roadmap, it's not on some memo from the CEO, why does it mean that I have to do that? And it's like, well, probably you should do it because it's just a good thing and the right thing to do, right? So I hear that sometimes. The other thing that I hear is what the other sort of bucket these things fall in is what I call the abject delusion phase, right? Where someone is like, hey, this thing that you're pointing out to me, these findings that you're saying are a big deal, is it really that big a deal? What's the likelihood anyone's going to find this? I'll tell you, Target.com has 1.8 million dynamically generated pages. Is cross-site scripting that bad on page 999? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But depending upon where we can go with it, we probably need to address it. So that's what I hear most often when I do get pushback from teams. And from product owners, to be honest, because typically, if I'm asking people to do work, it means that they're not doing other work for the business. So all those things get the sure Jan from me. But there's something to be said about the idea and the fact that they keep coming, this is still coming up. We're still seeing cross-site scripting. We're still seeing SQL injection. We're still seeing default passwords everywhere. This is 20 years of this stuff. And not to date myself, but that took place way, way, way before I got into InfoSec, right? So I think that we're still making this too hard. I do. I think that there's got to be other ways to communicate with developers. If we're still seeing the same thing that has happened for 20 years, you know, default password showing up, things starting with things operating in non-least privilege mode. You know, we have things operating at root. When I read through the DBIR, one of the things that jumped out at me was that they said that, you know, these things, the breaches and incidents that are out there, they don't start with the malware. Malware is part of it, sure, but it starts with this basic stuff. It starts with a bad password. It starts with the things that we already know that people should do. It starts with the bad hygiene, right? So I think that as an industry, if we can admit to ourselves that whatever we're doing and saying isn't working, then I think that we can figure out ways to make this much more accessible to the people that are actually building the tech. All right. So ultimately, I think, that's bright right there. I think the perceived problem is that, at least the problem the way I see it, is that we have what I call breadcrumb security. One aspect of that is when we say, I'm going to tell you just the things that you need to know, and I'm going to make you come back to me and ask me more questions. I'm going to make you come back to me and get the next step. Well, what if I don't know what question to ask? How do I even start? Maybe I don't know that I need to Google bcrypt. Maybe I don't need to know that I should Google SHA-256 and that the difference between SHA-1 and MD5 and all these other things. Maybe I don't know to Google that. Maybe I'm just going to take you at your word and assume that that's all I need to do. The other piece of it, the flip side of that particular coin, is the idea that I have to basically get a brain dump if I do come to security, right? If I say, okay, what wireless encryption standard should I be using, right? I'm setting up some sort of wireless platform. And then the answer comes, well, in 1903, DES was invented, and then, lo and behold, in 1998, it was broken, and then triple DES was there, but it was only around for a year, and then, like, we don't need all that, just tell me not to use DES. So there's lots of guidance out there, but not a lot of practical application. And then in terms of today's tech stacks that are out there and today's platforms that are in use, what we find is that a lot of it is end up being condescending or otherwise non-applicable for those people that are actually trying to do the right thing. So then what our response is as security is that we come back and we say, okay, well, we're gonna make this thing for you, and you just send all your telemetry to us. Just send all your network data to us. Just send all this to us, and we'll go over here and do our security thing, and then we'll come back and maybe we'll tell you, maybe we won't. But we've got this. It's on us. Well, I do know, and this is from my day-to-day job, I do know that developers want to be part of the solution. Product owners want to be part of the solution, but we have to, I think, take a different approach in terms of how we provide that information to them. So hot takes. Hot takes means that you can feel free to disagree. Be mad, throw a chair, storm out, don't storm out. But this is what I believe. I don't think any developer wants to be the one that writes the line of code that leads to a breach. I think that security rots, and the thing that we thought was secure on day zero will not be secure in 20 years. It will not be secure in 1 year. It will be different. And we need to be able to adjust to that. We need to be able to talk people through the entirety of the life cycle of their security posture. That means that we need to find ways of making the process of developing secure applications much more intuitive and natural. This is a UX issue, right? And we need to make sure that people don't have to necessarily speak the language of security in order to build a secure product. I don't necessarily need to know the difference between MD5, SHA-1, bcrypt, all these things. I just need to know that I should probably use a hashing algorithm that's strong. That's where I should be looking, right? Since I started my career in this space, the axiom that I hear all the time is that security needs a seat at the table. But from my perspective, it seems like a lot of organizations are still struggling to articulate what value security brings to the core business objectives. So I'd like to see us evolve as an industry and figure out ways that we can actually articulate how doing something like passwordless authentication turns into a larger revenue stream. How doing something like a data retention plan, how having that turns into actual monetary promise, right? That will allow us to not only build more secure things, but it allows our product teams and our engineers to start to think about this not necessarily as a security issue that's over here in the comm closet, which is where I spend most of my time in the Air Force, but actually part of the overarching revenue stream. All right. So can we make this easier? I like to think that we can. So what's easier? Let's define easier. So easier to me means that we have a way to offer intuitive, basic end-to-end security, right? End-to-end security coverage, natively in the most popular development language. You're in a NodeJS talk. We're going to be using JavaScript. It's going to work as part of the application and not be some add-on around it. And it's going to be tailored to the application's requirements. And when that application changes in a year or 2 years or 10 years, our security posture is going to be able to be flexible enough to change with it. So I created Spartan. Now, it says introducing Spartan. And before the question comes up at the end, one of the things that I often get asked is, okay, why'd you name it that? I am a person that enjoys studying military history. One of the things that we know about Spartans, beyond the 300, forget all that, that was, yeah, forget all of that. But one of the cool things that I did appreciate about that particular group of individuals is that they brought everything with them that they needed to succeed, right? And it wasn't a lot. I mean, we saw in the movie that, they had a shield and a spear and some leather underwear and some shoes, right? And that's what they needed. I like the idea of having something lightweight that was suited to the environment, that was going to be applicable to what the actual mission was. And that's why I called this Spartan. So what is it? It's a Node application designed to be a security library for other Node applications of various types, and we'll get into that in a second. It writes a human-readable security spec. It's JSON. What I liked about that is that literally I could take this JSON file, hand it to a developer, and they would know what was going on. I could hand it to a security auditor, and they would also know what was going on. It's human-readable, and it's meant to be something that is easily understood. And, oh, by the way, we also give you the pre-configured modules that are based upon that security spec. So I'm not going to then have to take all those things that's in the JSON file, and it's long when you see it, and then immediately try and figure out how I'm going to go build code to match it. I give you the modules with the security spec already built into it. So for those that care, it was tested with Mocha Chai, so it's built off Mocha Chai for unit testing. And we have coveralls for test coverage, and then it's also Travis CI ready. One of the things, and I'll show you this too when we get to the demo, one of the things that I was very, very insistent upon as I was building this was the idea that I should be able to very quickly tell as I'm building my code whether or not my security posture had changed, or if any of the files associated with my security configuration had been in any way modified, which is why I wanted to make it part of the build process. So, what's the actual deliverable here? What do we actually cover? We cover 6 application types: web, desktop, mobile, IoT, kiosks, and API. And you say, well, why all those weird buckets? Well, I'm not going to tell you all the places where I found Node running in Target, but it's everywhere. And it's everywhere in Walmart, it's everywhere in Amazon. Every place that you can think of it, it's probably got some aspect of it there. So I wanted to cover as wide of a breadth of application types as possible. The idea would be that developers configure the policy by answering a few security questions. We start with 10. The reason why I picked 10 is because when you start going past that, people's eyes start glazing over, and people stop paying attention, and it stops being an actual value-added exercise. So we start with 10 questions. There is an option to have much more granular control. The granular control option gives you 100 security questions you can answer, but it's there and available for you. All said, after they answer those 10 questions, they get security.json, which I just talked about. That's your security spec. I call it the policy. We might refer to it as a policy. They also get security.js, which essentially is the thing that points to all those modules that are configured. And then the actual security folder, which is all of the customized modules themselves. It covers 15 different security concerns, everything from API, cores, headers, logging, input validation, authentication, authorization. You'll see it here in a second when I open this up. But after they do all of that, and this is all in the command line, when they open up and they go into their actual application, the only thing that they really need to do to have access to the library is set it up as a variable in their code. Let security equal security, or if you're using ES6, import security as security, right? So, questions so far. Feel free to ask questions because the demo might run a little bit long. Yes, sir. Absolutely. I will post the slides. What I will not post is the demo because there's a skimmer in it. Okay. So, why do this? Why though? Why? So, one of the things that I continuously talk to developers about is the fact that a non-decision, and product owners, a non-decision is still a decision, right? Choosing not to do something is a decision. And oh, by the way, not knowing that something is going on or being willfully ignorant is a decision in and of itself. So I wanted to give people a way to have deliberate and traceable security risk decisions, right? So you know, if you're not going to turn on API configuration or whatever, you got to cover someplace else, you got to compensating control. You already know that. You're not looking to someplace else. It gets rid of the Narnia defense. It gets rid of the willful ignorance defense, right? And to an extent, I won't say it addresses the abject delusion defense. I think people will always be, a little bit delusional. I also like the idea of figuring out a way to decrease the cost of development and increase the velocity of development. That said, has anyone ever heard read the study that says that it costs 10 times more to fix a bug in production than it does in the development stages? So I wanted to figure out a way for us to do prevention, more prevention over cure, right? So by doing that, we actually decrease the cost of development, and we should, in turn, make it a lot easier to maintain, because we're not going to be out here hunting and pecking and looking for all these different security modules or modules that have to be separately configured. So I wanted something that could also be simple. And then for those new developers that come on board, this should also serve as a security design spec. So no more of this, I have no idea who does that. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know who's working on that. You already know. I've given you the spec. This is what I expect when you tell me that you're going to have authentication using usernames and passwords. I want 12-character passwords. I want 3 of them to be special characters. I want to have rotation every X number of days, right? Or even better, I want to do passwordless login and move past all this stuff, right? Okay. So, no, but for real, like, why do this? Like, I'll tell you, Spartan is something that it's a personal project for me. Target did not pay me to do this. I did this on my own, nights, weekends, holidays. It's been a work in progress. My family hates me now. They've not seen me in months. I'm kidding. They love me. Yeah, they do. They do. But I guess I wanted to address the idea of what happens after we get past the first line of defense. You guys I'm standing up in front of a bunch of hackers and people that know that there's no such thing as a silver bullet, and there's no such thing as one place to defend. My thought is that if everything fails, if my protections on the client fail, on the CDN fail, on the WAF, firewall, load balancer, if I'm dealing with issues with dependencies in my supply chain and source code, I needed to also be prepared to protect and defend myself at the application layer as well, right? I think intuitively we all get that the more steps there are for an attacker to take, the less likelihood that the attacker is going to be successful, right? So assuming that you've got all these other controls in place, and you have this as well, we're going to make it that much harder for an attacker to get where he or she wants to go, which is, ultimately the data, whatever the monetary source of information is, right? I like to think of the application as sort of the center of the earth, and Spartan being, the middle finger that you give the aliens when they show up to attack you, right? All right. Questions so far? Brief water break. All right, so we're going to do a quick little demo. And you can play too if you are interested. If you want to see me after, or if you have questions or concerns or problems, you can come talk to me later. It does require Node and Terminal, NPM. I'm going to be using VS Code for my IDE. All right. Okay. So if you are following along, you're going to run npm init tac-y. That will just give you a brand new package.json. Spartan does need package.json because if I'm going to evaluate the application dependencies, that's the first place I'm going to start looking. Assuming then that you do run npm, assuming that you do go through that process, the next thing I want you to do is type npm install -g Spartan shield. Again, these will be posted, so don't feel like you have to scramble to rush to copy all this down. But all said, you don't necessarily need the G flag. I have found that the G flag gives you global access to the package, meaning that you can have multiple applications running, and you can start a whole bunch of different applications, and Spartan you don't have to keep reinstalling it. However, when I ran this in Ubuntu, it required me to use sudo in order to install it into the user local bin location, which I didn't feel really comfortable about. So if you don't want to run it as sudo, just use npm install without the G, Spartan Shield. Okay, so this is a little hard to read, at least from where I'm sitting, but what you should see after you install it and you run _Spartan-H is this screen. And it describes all the different options that you get when you run the tool. One of the things, and I'll point this out when I run it live, but one of the things that I really enjoy, or well, that I think is a cool thing, is the integrity flag. I personally, can I use my mouse? Oh, that's kind of hard to see. But the integrity flag, I feel like, is one of the really big value points that I can then hand a hash to a developer or to a scrum master or to whoever's approving PRs and say, if this file changes, because we're just talking about a JSON file here, if this file changes, we probably have an issue, right? We now are starting to look at pipeline security from end to end, and this gives us one teeny tiny thing to look at as we're starting to have that conversation. Okay? So, let's play a game. I like to play games. It's Saturday. We should be playing games anyway. All right. So we're going to attempt to use Spartan. This is a demo. We're going to use Spartan to neutralize digital skimmers. Everyone know what digital skimmers are already? All right. It's a fancy name for something that's been going on since the dawn of the internet, right? But what makes them, I think, especially insidious. Ooh, bless you. What makes them especially insidious now is that they're targeting third-party code mostly. So the way it works, just as a recap, is that an attacker will exploit a third-party vendor's code, right? They'll exploit their web server, and they will take their own JavaScript and CSS and implant it on that web server, right? They'll either basically overwrite it in total, or they will take a subset of their of code and basically write it on top of the existing code base, right? So that way everything runs in line. Code runs from top to bottom, remember? So one of the things that happens after that is the attacker rightly makes the assumption that the third-party vendor is trusted, so that vendor's code then gets sucked up into the first party, the owned company's web pages, and then every client that accesses that web page then gets exposed to that malicious code, right? The current skimmers that are out there, you might have heard of it under the umbrella of MageCart, Fin7, it seems like they're getting into a little bit, but the current class of skimmers that are out there are smart enough to be able to detect what types of pages they're on. Are they on a checkout page? Are they on a login page? Are they on a page that has any sort of monetary value associated with it, meaning does it have the ability to input a credit card? If it does in fact find that it's on, let's say, a credit card page, then what ends up happening is that all that bad code that runs on top essentially skims that off. Meanwhile, bless you, the other, the normal process is taking place and no one is the wiser on either the third party or the first party, server. So you might have already heard about this. Ticketmaster got hit really hard. It was in the news last year. But Ticketmaster is sort of I think was the thing that had people looking up and looking around like little meerkats. But it also happened with British Airways and Sears, and quite a Newegg got hit as well. So it's been all over the place. I would say that one of the things that is becoming clear to people is that it's not just a matter of don't let your web server get popped. It's now your vendors and your supply chain's web servers can't get popped either, right? And so this is what happened with Ticketmaster. They had a vendor called Inventa, and Inventa ultimately got popped. And when they got popped, Ticketmaster absorbed their code. They didn't know that they absorbed bad code, and ultimately something like 300,000 people's credit card numbers got skimmed. It was a huge number. Huge number. So this little box in red, don't try to read this. This is all shell code, and it's been obfuscated and packed and uglified and all these things. But this is the skimmer. That's what it looks like, right? When we talk about, okay, I should be able to see somebody sending bad data. Chances are you won't. A modern web application today runs thousands and thousands of individual JavaScript files, and will absorb, as part of the supply chain, dozens of different libraries and CSS files and things like that. And all that gets packed in, it's web packed and uglified, minified, so that we're not all downloading 500 megabytes of garbage. Now it's just 5 megabytes of garbage. So when we talk about how can we not see this, it's because it literally hides in plain sight, right? So what are our options here? How do we actually deal with something like a digital skimmer? I have some thoughts, but here's how I think we should do it. All right. So one thing that came up fairly early when we were talking about this problem at Target is the idea of using JSON-P. And I flipped over the table. I didn't flip over the table, but I was like, no, we're not doing that. So JSON-P is basically the predecessor to web cores. Cores being cross-origin resource sharing, right? What bothers me about JSON-P is the simple fact that it relies on anonymous callbacks to circumvent cores controls. I said to the team I said to my team at the time, hey, if we are going to do that, let's just give the attackers let's just give them the code and let them hand over the credit cards, right? So we're not using JSON-P at Target, and I recommend that you don't use JSON-P for the simple fact that the anonymous callbacks make it very easy for it to be exploited. Another thing we could do, maybe we want to regenerate our JavaScript on every page load. So partial credit, right? Partial credit there, because that doesn't scale well. Yes, for a very small subset of pages, we could regenerate the JavaScript on every page load. We just shorten the cache period, and then as people come in, we check to make sure that they've got the latest and greatest version of what we intended. We regenerate it, and then we push it back out. But imagine a site that has 1.8 million web pages. That's not going to fly. However, we might consider doing that on a subset of our pages. Maybe we just want to do a hard refresh on our checkout pages. Maybe we just want to do a hard refresh on our login pages. Not a bad idea, which is why you get partial credit. The other thing that I recommend everybody do is to simply minimize the amount of third-party JavaScripts that we run everywhere, especially on sensitive pages. We probably don't need the Facebook API, and I don't want to be mean to anyone here that works for Facebook. We probably don't need the Facebook API running on our checkout pages. We probably don't need Pinterest running on our login pages. We should just take that stuff out. That's the easiest thing we could do today to start to insulate ourselves from this issue. Oops, my bad. Hang on. All right. So the other thing we could do is, of course, limit the context where that third-party JavaScript can run. We don't have to allow it to do everything just because it has access to our page, right? It doesn't need get, put, post, patch. Maybe it just needs get, right? Maybe we can run it in a sandbox, so that way we don't allow it to be frameable. We don't allow the response to be to generate pop-ups or anything like that. So we can limit the actual context in which that script can run. The other thing that we absolutely want to do is track the changes where we want to track the changes in the JavaScript that we do allow. So if something does change, we want to make sure that we understand that and we know when failures occur, right? All right, so let's get to the meat of it. All right. Where's my mouse? Mouse. All right, first thing I'm going to do, let's pull this over. Here we go. That is terribly difficult to see. All right. First thing I want to do is just give you a real quick demo. I'm actually going to mirror this so that way I don't have to look over my shoulder. All right, can y'all still see that? You should see it in a second. Come on. All All right. All right, so first I'm going to show you how Spartan runs. I already have it installed on my system. And this is what a developer or whoever was using it would see if they were running it. You can see I got some options here, including the ability to overwrite the policy, update the policy, set defaults. The default policy that I provide is extremely strict, meaning that it's pretty locked down. What I tell people when they ask me about using it is start with the default and then pair back to your needs, right? But it's pretty strict, so they can set their own defaults if they want to. So what we're going to do is run Spartan init, and you can see that there are some very basic questions that we ask. We ask kind of what application, what's the name of the application, what kind of application is it, how people will reach it, what the accessibility looks like is it going to be available over the internet, how will users sign in, you know, if there is any sign-in functionality, what kind of sessions are available, TTLs, and connection security if you're going to be running anything that allows HTTP connections. And then the reason I'm bringing this up now is it feeds directly into our discussion around how do we deal with digital skimmers, right? So, quick pause. It just so happens that the web is built. There are options with some headers that are out there that allow allow us to configure some security headers. It turns out that of the top 1 million websites out there, less than 1% have security headers turned on. And by security headers, I mean, are we turning on things like cross-site scripting protections? Are we turning on our caching headers? Are we turning on content security policies, right? Out of the top 1 million sites, 1% have any sort of content security policy turned on. All said, one of the things that as I was building this, I was talking to the developers I work with. I said, why is it that we don't have content security policy turned on? They said, I mean, frankly, we'd be going back in time to look at all of our sources, to go and look at all of our whitelists and things like that. So I wanted to find a way to make it very quick and easy. Let's see if I can make this bigger too. A little bit bigger. I wanted to find a way to make it very quick and easy for people to define their sources up front, right? So this is essentially your content security policy. This is going to be available to you in Spartan as soon as you finish up. You've already put together your sources, and I will point this out. Stupid VI. I'll point this out. Actually, I don't have it written in here, but there's a connection source in here that you can add that allows you to really, really granularly define what places you can connect to, which is crucial to our discussion on skimmers. All right, so we keep going through, talk about forms and caching strategies and where things are going to be hosted, and of course logging and auditing. And then at the end, I spit this out and I say kind of like a is this what you ordered kind of a thing, right? Is this what you're looking to actually do? If it's okay, great. And at the end, what you get is the next steps, right? I tell you if you want to go off and install additional modules, you should do that. I didn't feel right installing random code into other people's installing code in other people's repositories and things like that in their code bases, so I give them the option to go off and install those things. Additionally, we end up with this hash. Now, when I talk to Scrum Masters about this, I'm like, you could take this hash and you could easily post it, right? Post it, put it in as part of your as your CI/CD as you're building it. If it doesn't match it, don't absorb it. Like something's gone wrong in the code, right? Something's not right with security policy, because we're just talking about a JSON file here once again. All right, so you can see here now that I've got security, this folder. Sorry that the colors here are kind of wonky. Security.js and security.json. I'm going to go into security. All right, so literally this is what's written. Wasn't there before, but this is what's covered out of that, answering those 10 questions, right? And I felt like it was important to expose these modules to developers so that way they had the chance to go through and change them if they wanted to, all right, and make it really part of their code base. So that's Spartan. And I am now going to flip over to our demo real quick. This is going to be lightning fast because I'm running short on time. All right, so when we talk about skimmers, it's kind of a tale of three servers, right? So we've got our exfil, our no kidding, the bad place, the sunken place, as it were, where all of the skimmed data will go. We've got the server that's been attacked, the attacked server running on 5001, and then we've got our actual victim server running on 5000. Now, I've already set up Spartan, and I've already set up my content security policy as part of it. And you can see here that I've set up a connection source of localhost 5001. That will be important here in a moment, but I just want to show you real quick that nothing else is enabled in this application that I'm running, right? It's just, if you were someone that went to localhost 5000, yolanda.com, whatever it is, this is what you would see, right? And if you're looking in the console, if you're looking in network, it would be fairly benign. So let's go and see if we can register. Oh, it's looking for a piece of CSS. All right. So the way this works is that I am currently serving up a file called whoopsie in my attacked server, right? So whoopsie, all it's doing right now is it's going to just echo back everything I type into these form fields. Right? Please, never do this. Never ever do this, but for the purposes of seeing it, definitely not. For the purposes of seeing it, there you have it, right? And so what ends up happening is on my victim server, I have a copy of that data, and I got a little timestamp of when it came in. Nothing's showing up here, nothing's showing up here. But what I'm gonna do is, let's pretend for a second that I'm able to exploit this 5001 server. And after exploiting it, I decided I'm gonna add my bad code to whoopsie. Right? So then what we end up with here is, do it one more time. Let's just clear this out right here so we can know what we're looking at. Foo at bar.com, foo and foo. Right? So yay verily, that's coming through. Now, why did that not come through on my exfil server? What did I miss? What did I miss? All right. Did I not save it? Should have come through. Live demos. I promise it worked. All right. All right. We'll try one more time. There we go. Don't know why. Looks like I had a little gremlin there. But, so yeah, so I was able to skim this off, and here's that same data showing up on my exfil server here, right? So yay for me as the attacker, bad for me as the victim, because I didn't get any of that feedback beyond the fact that I can't see some favicons and a CSS file that's part of this application, right? Now, if I am wanting to level up and be a little bit more secure, the next thing I'm going to do is actually let's just turn on Spartan, right? So remember, I've already enabled my content security policy. So that, and I'm requiring this particular component of the library as headers. and I'm going to turn on my content security policy here, right? Just turn it on as true. Because I don't have any sort of certificate running, I'm going to turn off strict transport security. So take a note of these timestamps here as well, right? One more time. All right. So here's sort of the real value add here, right? I turned on CSP true, based upon answering those 10 questions. And now, not only do I have the feedback that I could not connect to this bad server that I didn't even know was there, right? Because I've set this up in my content security policy, but now it didn't come through on the attacker server. It did still come through on my server, right? So I'm still able to do it. So even though Whoopsie was compromised, it's not able to actually complete the actual execution of that bad code. So, yay. Questions so far? I know I'm now going like lightning fast. Yes?
The entry generator, is that something you include in an SRI and CSP?
You can include an SRI. Actually, you include it in the actual script tag itself, and you include it in the CSP as well. Yeah. All right, so let's wrap up real quick here. One of the things that I tell developers and I tell product owners and product teams is that we have 3 obligations. Our obligations are to protect the customer. We're not doctors, but we should still be saying first do no harm. We don't want to embarrass them, we don't want to inconvenience them, and we certainly don't want to hurt them in any way. Our second obligation is protect the roadmap. By protect the roadmap, I mean protect the business. There are ways for, oh boy. I think the battery's going on this. There are ways for us to introduce security initiatives that actually help the business. We can talk about things like data retention policies as a business initiative, not necessarily as a security problem. Additionally, especially for developers, we have to protect the pipeline. And developers are part of the pipeline. That is the heart. That seems like that's like that for whatever reason that is the toughest point to get across, right? What I tell folks, and no one wants to hear this, is don't build what you can't protect. If you can't protect it, then don't put that in. If you only build as much pipeline as you can afford to protect, and that does include developers. Once you have built it, you need to know what you have. One of the things, and I'm sure you have all been exposed to this as well, is that a thing that becomes a proof of concept suddenly becomes finished product, suddenly becomes this thing that we're maintaining for years and years and years, and ultimately no one knows where it came from, how long it's supposed to be there, who's in charge of it, and now it's insecure and no one wants to know, no one knows what to do with it. So we have to be able to consistently and continuously keep track of what we have and be prepared to turn things off if you no longer need them. Delete it if you don't need it, right? For security types, the folks in this room, I would encourage you, if you are in an organization that is running Agile, please go and sit in on a design sprint. Please go and advocate for design sprints. Please, you don't have to write code. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to do that to write a requirement, to write a story. People need to see you, and it can't be this Bible of guidance that you throw out one day. It needs to be a, let me come talk to you consistently and constantly. And it's not necessarily just for application teams. If you are on if let's say you're on network and you're running firewalls, make sure your product owners understand, especially if they're asking you to open up ports, and services and things like that. Make sure they understand who you are and what the implications of what they're asking for is. It can't just be a, no, we can't do that, that's against policy. It's more of a, what are you trying to do and how is opening a firewall going to help you get there? All right. All right, so this might be one to take a picture of. This is sort of the all things skimmer as well as more Spartan info. There is a doc site. Right now I'm going through a refactor in Spartan, so the docs are kind of catching up last. So read it, take a look at it, but it's going to be updated fairly soon here. I'll leave that for another second or so. All right, lightning fast questions. All right. Okay, well that was this was fun for me. I don't know about for you. I had